You used to love reading, creating things, learning new skills, exploring hobbies, being passionate about something. Now nothing interests you. You call this depression. It might be something worse. You believe you lost interest in things because you are burned out, because you are getting older, because responsibilities increased and free time decreased. You think this is normal part of adulthood, that passion fades, that hobbies become childish, that losing enthusiasm for everything is just what happens when you mature. But you did not naturally outgrow your interests. You systematically destroyed your capacity to be interested in anything, through overstimulation that desensitized your reward system, through using interests as escape mechanism rather than genuine engagement, through turning every hobby into optimization project, through comparing your enjoyment to others' curated highlights, through documenting experiences instead of having them, through letting chronic stress turn everything into obligation, through performing interests for validation rather than experiencing them for their own sake. You are not depressed in clinical sense. You are psychologically depleted in ways that make nothing feel rewarding anymore. The activities that used to engage you still exist. The capacity for interest still exists somewhere inside you, but you have trained yourself out of being able to access it through years of relating to interests in ways that killed the interest while you were pursuing it. Understanding why you lost interest in almost everything requires examining not what changed about the activities, but what changed about how you engage with activities, how you experience enjoyment, how you relate to your own interests when everything in modern life is designed to destroy your capacity for genuine sustained engagement with anything. You scroll, watch, consume, feel nothing, want more stimulation, never satisfied. You call this entertainment. It is systematic destruction of your dopamine system. Here is the first reason. You have overstimulated your reward system to the point where normal activities cannot compete with the constant high-intensity input you have trained your brain to expect. Every time you open your phone, you get hit with novelty, new posts, new videos, new content designed specifically to grab attention and generate dopamine response. Your brain gets dozens of small dopamine hits per hour from scrolling, from notifications, from the endless stream of stimulation. This is not how your dopamine system was designed to function. It evolved to give you pleasure and motivation from activities that took effort and time, learning a skill, creating something, solving a problem, building a relationship. These activities release dopamine slowly over extended engagement. But you have hijacked the system with artificial input that provides immediate intense hits without requiring any effort or investment. The result is desensitization. When your brain receives constant high-intensity stimulation, it adjusts by reducing sensitivity to dopamine. It needs more stimulation to feel the same reward. This means activities that used to feel engaging, reading a book, having a conversation, working on a project, now feel unbearably boring because they cannot compete with the intensity of stimulation you have trained your brain to expect. You try to read. Your brain, accustomed to novelty every 30 seconds, finds sustained focus on single text impossible. The reading is not stimulating enough. You are bored within minutes. Not because reading is boring, but because your dopamine baseline has been reset to require constant novelty, and reading cannot provide that. You try to work on hobby. It requires sustained attention, gradual progress, delayed gratification. Your brain, trained to expect immediate rewards, experiences this as deprivation. The hobby feels like work. The enjoyment that used to come from gradual mastery is inaccessible because you have lost capacity for delayed gratification. You need immediate feedback, immediate results, immediate stimulation, or your brain interprets the activity as not worth doing. This is why you lost interest. Not because the activity stopped being interesting, but because you destroyed your brain's ability to find them interesting by training it to need levels of stimulation that normal activities cannot provide. You are a dopamine addict who can no longer feel pleasure from anything that is not specifically engineered to hijack your attention. You used to love the hobby until you needed it to escape, to distract from what you were avoiding, to fill the emptiness. You call this passion. It was using the interest to avoid feeling instead of engaging with it genuinely. The second reason is that you were using your interests as escape mechanism rather than engaging with them for their own sake, and eventually this killed the interest because escape always fails, and when it fails, you blame the activity for not saving you from yourself. You were not reading because you loved reading. You were reading to avoid thinking about your life. You were not creating because you loved creating. You were creating to fill the void. You were not learning because you loved learning. You were learning to prove something or fix something or become someone. The interest was never about the interest itself, it was about what the interest could do for you. Could it distract you from your problems? Could it make you feel accomplished? Could it give you a sense of purpose you were not finding elsewhere? Could it prove you were interesting or talented or disciplined? The activity was instrumental means to psychological end, and when it failed to deliver the psychological benefits you needed from it, you lost interest. This is exhausting relationship to interests. You cannot enjoy something when you need it to solve your psychological problems. You cannot lose yourself in activity when you are using the activity to escape yourself. You cannot experience flow when you are desperately hoping the activity will fix the emptiness inside you. Eventually, the interest fails to provide the escape or validation or purpose you were demanding from it. The reading does not make you stop thinking about your life. The creating does not fill the void. The learning does not make you feel valuable. And when the interest fails to deliver these things it was never supposed to deliver, you conclude that you have lost interest in the activity when actually you were never genuinely interested. You were just using it. Real interest is intrinsic. You engage because the engagement itself is rewarding, not because it provides something else you need. But you have lost capacity for intrinsic motivation because you have spent years using every activity instrumentally as means to psychological end, as escape from difficult feelings, as proof of worth. You cannot recover genuine interest until you stop demanding that interests save you from yourself. You started the hobby. It was fun. Then you optimized it, tracked it, compared your progress to others, made it efficient. You call this improvement. It is turning intrinsic motivation into extrinsic performance that kills enjoyment. The third reason is that you turned every interest into optimization project, and optimization kills enjoyment by replacing intrinsic motivation with external metrics. You could not just enjoy the activity, you had to get better at it, track your progress, maximize efficiency, compare yourself to others, turn it into measurable achievement. The moment you did this, the activity stopped being play and became work. You started running because you enjoyed it. Then you got running app that tracked distance and pace. Then you started comparing your times to previous times, to other people's times, to what times should be for someone your age and fitness level. Then running became about hitting metrics rather than enjoying running. The experience of running, being outside, moving your body, clearing your mind, became secondary to the data. You were no longer running for the experience. You were running for the numbers. This happened to every interest. You started painting for enjoyment. Then you started trying to improve, comparing your work to others, feeling inadequate, pushing yourself to get better faster. The painting stopped being about the meditative process of putting color on canvas and became about producing work that met external standards. You could not just paint, you had to paint well enough to justify the time spent painting. The optimization mindset destroys intrinsic motivation by making the activity about external validation rather than internal experience. When you are measuring and comparing and optimizing, you are not present with the activity. You are performing the activity while being evaluated by imagined judges who are measuring whether you are good enough. The joy that comes from absorption in process is replaced by anxiety about whether you are meeting standards. You also made every interest productive. Could not just read, had to read certain number of books per year, had to read books that improved you, had to take notes and apply lessons. Could not just learn, had to master skills quickly, had to become expert, had to have something to show for the time invested. Every moment of leisure became project to optimize, every interest became productivity performance, every hobby became obligation to improve. You lost interest because you destroyed the intrinsic motivation that makes activities enjoyable. Nothing can be fun when it is being measured and evaluated and compared and optimized. You turned everything into work. Work is not fun. You enjoyed the activity until you saw others doing it better, more beautifully, more impressively, getting more recognition. You call this inspiration. It is comparison that killed your ability to enjoy without measuring yourself against others. The fourth reason is that constant exposure to others' curated highlights destroyed your ability to enjoy anything without comparing your experience to others' performances. You see someone's photography and suddenly your photography feels inadequate. You see someone's woodworking and your woodworking feels amateur. You see someone's progress on fitness journey and your progress feels insignificant. The comparison is automatic, unavoidable, and it poisons every interest. Before social media, you could enjoy hobby in isolation. You could be bad at something and not know how bad because you were not constantly exposed to people who are excellent at it. You could make progress at your own pace without seeing others making faster progress. You could enjoy activity for its own sake without constant reminder of how much better others are doing it. But now every interest you pursue is immediately contextualized by exposure to people who are better at it. You try to learn guitar, and within minutes of posting about it, you are exposed to teenage prodigies and professional musicians and people who learned faster than you. The enjoyment of learning is replaced by inadequacy about not being as good as people who have been doing it for decades or who have natural talent you lack. You cannot just enjoy the activity anymore because you are always measuring yourself against highlights others present. You cannot appreciate your own progress because you are comparing it to others' destinations. You cannot be present with your experience because you are thinking about how your experience compares to experiences others are having that appear more impressive or more beautiful or more accomplished. The comparison also makes you perform your interests rather than experience them. You are thinking about how it will look when you share it, whether others will be impressed, whether it meets standard that will generate validation. You are not painting because you enjoy painting. You are painting to produce work that will compare favorably to others' work. The experience is mediated through imagined audience evaluation. This makes everything exhausting and nothing satisfying. You cannot win the comparison game because there is always someone better. You cannot enjoy anything when you are constantly measuring it against others' curated performances. The comparison has destroyed your capacity for simple enjoyment of whatever you are doing at whatever level you are doing it. You went to the concert, the museum, the event. You watched through your phone, documented it, posted it. You call this capturing the memory. It is experiencing nothing while performing that you experienced something. The fifth reason is that you lost ability to be present with experiences because you mediated everything through documentation, performance, and analysis. You could not just attend the concert. You had to record it, photograph it, post about it, prove you were there. You could not just visit the museum. You had to document which pieces you saw, share the highlights, perform the experience for audience. The experience itself became secondary to the performance of having had the experience. This means you were never actually present. You were at the concert, but you were thinking about the angle for the photo, the caption for the post, how it would appear to others. You were at the museum, but you were scrolling through rather than looking at the art because you were trying to see enough pieces to make the visit impressive when you shared it. You were never absorbed in the experience. You were performing the experience for imagined audience while the actual experience happened around you unnoticed. The documentation also killed the experience by making you relate to it as content rather than as lived moment. You were not enjoying the sunset, you were capturing the sunset. Not listening to the music, recording the music. Not tasting the food, photographing the food. Every experience was filtered through whether it would make good content, whether others would find it interesting, whether it was worth documenting. If it was not documentable, you did not fully value it. This killed your capacity for simple presence with whatever is happening. You could no longer lose yourself in book because part of you was thinking about what you would say about it. Could no longer be absorbed in conversation because you were thinking about whether there was story here you could share later. Could no longer enjoy hobby because you were documenting it for others rather than experiencing it for yourself. You lost interest in everything because you stopped actually experiencing anything. You were always performing experience, documenting experience, sharing experience, but never being present with experience. The interests that used to engage you became content creation opportunities, and content creation is work, not enjoyment. You killed the interests by turning them into performances rather than allowing them to be experiences. Everything feels like obligation, even the things that are supposed to be fun, even the rest, even the hobbies. You call this responsibility. It is chronic stress that has turned your entire life into work, including the parts that are not work. The sixth reason is that chronic stress and burnout have rewired your brain so that everything feels like obligation rather than opportunity, so that even activities designed to be enjoyable feel like items on to-do list that must be completed. You are so accustomed to operating in stress mode, so habituated to pressure and urgency and obligation, that you have lost ability to shift into mode where things can be enjoyed rather than completed. You have time to read, but reading feels like task. Another thing you should do, another item on the list of self-improvement obligations you are failing to meet. The reading that used to be escape has become assignment. You have time for hobby, but hobby feels like work. Something you must make progress on, something you should be better at by now, something that generates more pressure rather than relieving pressure. This is because your nervous system is stuck in sympathetic activation. You are chronically stressed, constantly operating as if everything is urgent, unable to downshift into parasympathetic mode where rest and play and enjoyment are possible. When your system is locked in stress response, everything is processed as potential threat or obligation or problem to solve. Nothing can be purely enjoyed because you are not in physiological state that allows for enjoyment. The chronic stress also means you are exhausted in ways that make engagement with anything feel impossible. You have no energy left after managing all the actual obligations. The idea of starting hobby or reading book or learning something new feels overwhelming because you are already operating at maximum capacity, just managing basics. The interests require energy you do not have, so you default to passive consumption, scrolling, watching, consuming content that requires nothing from you, and even this does not feel good. It just feels like only thing you have energy for. You did not lose interest in activities. You lost the physiological capacity to engage with activities because chronic stress has dysregulated your nervous system and depleted your energy to a point where nothing feels doable and everything feels like additional burden. You cannot recover interest until you address the stress and burnout that have made your entire existence feel like work, including the parts that are supposed to be rest. You had the interests, pursued them, spent time on them, but you never chose them. They were never yours. You call this having hobbies. It is performing interests you thought you should have rather than discovering what actually engages you. The seventh and perhaps most painful reason is that you lost interest because you were never genuinely interested. You were performing interests you believed you should have based on how they would make you appear to others or to yourself. You never asked what actually interests you. You asked what interests would make you seem interesting, what hobbies would make you seem well-rounded, what pursuits would make you seem intellectual or cultured or accomplished. You read because readers seem intelligent. You learned instrument because musicians seem talented. You started fitness pursuit because fit people seem disciplined. You took up cooking because people who cook seem cultured. Every interest was chosen based on external image it would create rather than internal pull you felt toward it. This means the interests were never sustainable because they were never genuinely yours. You were forcing yourself to be interested in things that looked good but did not actually engage you. You were maintaining hobbies for the image rather than the experience, and eventually the performance became too exhausting to maintain. You could not keep pretending to love reading when you were only reading to seem smart. Could not keep forcing yourself to practice instrument when you were only learning it to seem talented. When you stopped performing the interests, you interpreted this as having lost interest. But you cannot lose what you never had. You were never interested. You were just performing interest because you thought you should be interested in these things. The relief you feel at not having to maintain these hobbies is signal that they were never yours to begin with. You also never gave yourself permission to be interested in things that would not make you look good. The things that genuinely capture your attention might be things you judge as shallow or worthless or embarrassing. You might actually love trashy reality TV, but you think you should love classic literature. Might actually enjoy simple video games, but you think you should enjoy intellectually challenging hobbies. Might actually be interested in subjects you consider beneath you. You lost interest in almost everything because almost everything you were doing was performance rather than genuine engagement. You cannot recover interest until you give yourself permission to discover what actually interests you rather than what you think should interest you. You lost interest in almost everything. Not because the things stopped being interesting. Not because you outgrew them. Not because this is normal part of aging, because you systematically destroyed your capacity to be interested in anything. You overstimulated your dopamine system until normal activities could not compete with constant high-intensity input you trained your brain to expect. You used interests as escape mechanism rather than engaging genuinely, and when they failed to fix your psychological problems, you blamed the interests. You turned every hobby into optimization project that killed intrinsic motivation by replacing enjoyment with performance metrics. You compared your experience to others' curated highlights until comparison poisoned every activity. You documented and performed everything instead of being present with anything. You let chronic stress turn even leisure into obligation. You pursued interests you thought you should have rather than discovering what actually engages you. None of these are permanent conditions. Your dopamine system can recalibrate if you stop overstimulating it. Your capacity for intrinsic motivation can return if you stop optimizing everything. Your ability to enjoy without comparison can recover if you stop exposing yourself to others' performances. Your presence can return if you stop documenting every experience. Your nervous system can regulate if you address the chronic stress. Your genuine interests can emerge if you stop performing interests you think you should have. But recovery requires recognizing what you did to yourself. You did not naturally lose interest. You trained yourself out of being able to be interested through years of relating to interests in ways that destroyed the capacity for interest. You turned everything into performance, everything into comparison, everything into optimization, everything into content, everything into work. The path back is not finding new interests, it is recovering capacity to be interested. This means dramatically reducing stimulation, engaging for experience rather than escape, allowing things to be enjoyed without measurement, stopping the comparison, being present instead of performing, addressing the stress, discovering what actually interests you rather than what should interest you. You lost interest in almost everything. Now you must learn to be interested again, this time genuinely.